My name is Sharon Butler, and I'm 31 years old. 6 years ago, I made myself a silent promise that I would never again beg my parents for anything. Not their money, not their attention, not even their love. I had learned the hard way that in my family, compassion had an expiration date. It started when I got sick. I was between jobs, juggling rent prescriptions and hospital bills. My savings were gone, and my insurance refused to cover the medication that kept my blood sugar stable. I remember sitting at the kitchen table with the phone pressed to my ear, rehearsing what I would say. Mom, Dad, I just need help for a few months. I'll pay you back. I was trembling before they even answered. What I got, instead of understanding, was a long, disappointed sigh from my father and my mother's voice, cool and clipped, telling me, "You need to learn to stand on your own 2 feet, Sharon. We can't keep saving you every time life gets hard." They made it sound as if I were some lazy teenager asking for concert tickets. I tried explaining through tears that it wasn't about comfort, it was about survival. My father cut me off with a chuckle that still echoes in my nightmares. "You always exaggerate. You'll figure it out like everyone else does." We fought, the kind of fight that leaves bruises you can't see. I told them they'd never cared about me anyway, that it was stupid of me to expect help from parents who only ever saw me as an inconvenience. My mother hung up mid-sentence. That was the last real conversation we had. 6 years of silence followed. Even at family gatherings, we acted like strangers. My brother Jack always stood beside them like a prince at court, his glass of whiskey half full, his voice full of excuses. He was their favorite, always had been. It didn't matter that he'd been fired 3 times or that he spent more nights drunk than sober. They adored him. Then came the accident. Jack's wife, sweet, patient Claire, died in a car crash, leaving behind 2 little boys, ages 8 and 6. The woman who had held their family together was suddenly gone, and Jack unraveled fast. He drank like his body was made of hollow glass, filling it with poison just to feel something. At first, he managed to fake stability, dropping the kids off at our parents' house or Claire's parents' place during the day. But soon, even that routine fell apart. A week ago, he dropped them off again, promising to pick them up by nightfall. He never returned. Instead, he sent an email, a cold 1-paragraph note. "I can't do this anymore. They deserve better than me. I'm leaving them with you." Then he vanished. No calls, no replies, no trace. My parents tried to contact him, of course, calls, messages, even showing up at his old apartment. Nothing. Finally, they called me. The moment I saw Mom flashing on my phone screen, my heart clenched. For a second, I almost didn't answer. 6 years of silence should have been enough of a hint that I wanted it to stay that way. But curiosity, or maybe guilt, won. I picked up. "Sharon." My mother's voice wavered, like she'd rehearsed it too. "Your brother's gone. He left the boys with us. We can't handle it, sweetheart. We need your help." At first, I didn't even respond. Just listened to the faint clinking of glasses in the background, my father's cough, the whimper of one of the boys. "Help," I asked finally. "How?" She sighed heavily. "Financially. You know we're retired. Our savings won't last long if we have to raise 2 children." The absurdity made me laugh. "You're asking me for money." "Sharon, they're your nephews," she snapped, all softness gone. "We're family. Family takes care of each other." Those words, "family takes care of each other," landed like a knife. Because 6 years ago, I'd said almost the same thing, and my father's reply had burned itself into my memory. "Don't rely on us just because we're your family." I swallowed hard. "You know what's funny," I said quietly. "That's exactly what you told me when I needed help. Word for word." The line went dead silent. "Sharon," my mother whispered, but I cut her off. "You told me to figure things out on my own, so that's what I'm doing now." My father jumped in, his voice thick with disbelief. "You're comparing your little medication problem to 2 children being abandoned." I almost laughed. "No, Dad. I'm comparing compassion. And yours seems to have run out a long time ago." He scoffed. "You've become cruel." "Maybe," I said, "or maybe I just learned it from the best." I hung up before they could answer. For a long time, I just sat there, the hum of the refrigerator filling the silence. My hands were shaking, but not from guilt, from release. Years of swallowed words and forced politeness poured out of me in that one call. When my husband Ronnie came home, he found me sitting on the kitchen floor phone, still in my hand. "They called," I murmured. He crouched beside me, brushing a thumb over my cheek. What did they want? "Money, for Jack's kids." His jaw tightened, and I said no. He gave a small nod. "Good." But I didn't feel good. Just hollow. Because even after everything, a tiny part of me still wanted them to be the kind of parents who'd never have made me say no in the first place. Later that night, I stood by the window watching the city lights blur in the distance. My reflection looked unfamiliar, older, harder. I wonder if they'll ever call again, I whispered. Ronnie wrapped his arms around me from behind. If they do, he said softly, you don't have to pick up. I nodded, leaning into his chest. For a fleeting moment, I believed him, that this was the end of it. But deep down, something inside me knew better. My parents had never been good at letting go, not of their pride, not of control, and certainly not of me. And I was right, because that phone call wasn't the end of our story. It was only the beginning of their revenge. The morning after the call, I woke up to 23 missed messages. At first, I thought something had happened to Jack. Maybe they'd found him, or worse. But as I scrolled through my phone, I realized none of the messages were about him. They were about me. Sharon. I can't believe you said that to your parents. You always were the selfish one. Those kids are innocent. How could you? Every relative I hadn't spoken to in years suddenly remembered my number. They all had the same tone, moral outrage wrapped in fake concern. And I knew exactly where it came from. My parents had told everyone. It was déjà vu. Growing up, this was their favorite trick. Whenever I refused to play the role of the dutiful daughter, they'd twist the story until I looked ungrateful. It always worked. No one questioned them because in our family, my parents' word was gospel and mine was just noise. I muted the group chat and put my phone face down, but the shame crawled under my skin anyway. Ronnie slid a mug of coffee across the table toward me. They've started their campaign, huh? I nodded, staring at the steam. They always do. He reached over, tilting my chin up gently. You didn't do anything wrong, Sharon. I know, I whispered, but it still feels like I did. He sighed. That's the problem with guilt. It doesn't need logic to survive. His words should have helped. But as I sat there in our quiet kitchen, I could almost hear my mother's voice echoing in my head, the same one that had narrated my childhood. Why can't you be more like Jack? Why can't you make things easier for everyone? It always came back to him. Jack, charming, reckless, adored. He was 8 years older than me, and to my parents he could do no wrong. When he skipped class, it was because he needed a break. When I got a B+, it was not trying hard enough. I remember once, when I was 13, I'd saved up to buy Mom a birthday gift, a silver locket. I'd cleaned dishes at a cafe for weeks to afford it. When she opened it, she smiled politely and said, "Oh, honey, you shouldn't waste your money on me." That same evening, Jack came home with flowers he'd picked from a neighbor's garden. She cried. Actual tears. I used to think I was imagining the difference, that maybe I was oversensitive like she said, but as I got older, the pattern hardened into truth. They celebrated his chaos, punished my effort. When I got sick years later, part of me believed it would finally make them care, that maybe illness would earn me the tenderness I'd always begged for. Instead, it just proved how disposable I was. Now hearing them demand my help for the children of the son they'd always chosen over me, it was almost poetic, cruel poetry. That evening, my aunt called. I hadn't spoken to her since she scolded me at my wedding for not inviting enough family elders. "Sharon," she said, with that syrupy tone people use before they insult you. "I heard about the situation. I know you've had difficulties with your parents, but this isn't the time for grudges." "I'm not holding a grudge," I replied. "I'm holding boundaries." A pause, then a disbelieving chuckle. "Boundaries. Sweetheart, they're your parents. You owe them." There it was. That word again, owe. As if parenthood was a transaction, as if giving birth automatically earned lifelong repayment. "I owe them nothing," I said quietly, "especially not after what they've done." Her voice hardened. "You always were dramatic." I hung up before she could finish. My hands were shaking again, but this time not from fear, from anger. Later that night, Ronnie found me sitting in bed staring at my phone. "Block them," he said simply. I looked up. "All of them?" He nodded. "Every single one." It felt like cutting a cord that had been strangling me for years. One by one, I blocked their numbers, the aunts, the cousins, even the family friend who'd texted me a meme about cold daughters. When I finally put my phone down, the silence in our apartment felt different. Not empty clean. But clean doesn't always mean peaceful. Because once the noise stopped, my mind filled with something else memories. Little flashes that came uninvited. My mother's perfume before a family dinner. My father's voice on Christmas laughing with Jack. The empty chair they used to forget to save for me. And then one I hadn't remembered in years, my mother's face the day I left home for good. No tears, no hug, just a flat final line. Don't come back asking for help when life disappoints you. Maybe that's why the call yesterday had hurt so much, because they were the ones asking this time, and some childish part of me had still hoped they'd sound different, softer, like parents should. Instead, they sounded like debt collectors. I tried to shake the thought away. I told myself it didn't matter anymore. I was free. I had my own life, my own home, my own family with Ronnie. But that night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the apartment sounded like a whisper of the past. What if they were right? What if I was cruel? What if the boys, their innocent faces, their confusion, ended up paying the price for my resentment? Ronnie stirred beside me. Can't sleep. I hesitated. I keep thinking about the kids. He turned eyes half open. They're not your responsibility. I know, but they didn't do anything wrong. Neither did you, he said softly. But you're still the one carrying all the guilt. That silenced me. For a long while, we just listened to the hum of the city outside, and somewhere between the noise and the quiet, I decided something. If I was ever going to break this cycle, I had to stop mistaking guilt for empathy. I could feel sorry for those boys and still refuse to sacrifice myself for people who never would have done the same. The next morning, I wrote a simple message to my parents before deleting their numbers for good. Please don't contact me again. I wish the kids well, but I'm not your solution. Then I hit send. As the message disappeared, so did the last fragile thread connecting me to them. For the first time in years, I could breathe. I thought that was closure. But I didn't know that sometimes the silence after a goodbye isn't peace. It's the inhale before the next storm. It had been 3 quiet weeks since I sent that final message. 3 weeks where no one called, no one texted, no one tried to shame me into being the family's savior. For the first time in years, I felt something close to peace. Ronnie and I were spending our Saturday morning pruning the little garden out front, a ritual that had become oddly healing. The air smelled like wet soil and honeysuckle. I remember thinking, maybe the past is finally done with me. Then I saw the cab pull up. The engine barely stopped before 2 familiar figures stepped out my parents. For a split second, I froze. My hands still held the pruning shears, the sunlight catching on the metal blades. They hadn't called first. No warning, no message, just appeared like ghosts walking out of a grave I'd already buried. Ronnie glanced up from the porch. Sharon. They're here, I whispered. I thought about running inside, pretending I didn't see them. But my mother had already spotted me. She raised her hand in that authoritative wave I knew too well, the kind that wasn't a greeting but a command. Sharon, she called her tone rehearsed, calm, the kind people use when they want something. We need to talk. Every instinct screamed no. But something, maybe pride, maybe masochism, made me stay rooted in place. 5 minutes, I said coldly. They walked up the path slowly, as if afraid I might vanish if they moved too fast. My father looked older, thinner. My mother somehow looked exactly the same, tight smile, immaculate hair, a woman who would rather die than show weakness. When they reached me, I spoke before they could start. If this is about money, or the boys save your breath. My father lifted his hands, palms open. It's not about that, Sharon. We're not here to ask for anything. That was new. My mother hesitated, looking at me, the way one looks at a stranger whose name they used to know. We wanted to talk, as a family. The word family made my stomach twist. Ronnie came to stand behind me quietly. I could feel the tension in his body like a wall at my back. He didn't say a word, but his presence said enough. You don't have to do this alone. I gestured toward the porch steps. Fine, talk. My parents exchanged a glance before sitting down side by side. They looked uncomfortable, like they didn't belong on furniture that wasn't theirs. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The only sound was the wind rustling through the hedges. Finally, my mother began, her voice unsteady. We owe you an apology. That sentence alone was enough to make me blink. My parents apologizing, I wasn't sure whether to laugh or cry. My father nodded. We were unfair to you, Sharon, for a long time. I crossed my arms. Unfair, that's one word for it. We know we weren't there for you when you needed us, my mother said softly. And there's a reason for that. Not an excuse, but a reason. Ronnie's hand brushed mine briefly. A silent question. Do you want to hear this? I nodded, though my heart was pounding. When I got pregnant with you, my mother began, eyes fixed on the floorboards. We weren't ready. You weren't planned. The air around me seemed to thicken. What? You were an accident, my father said bluntly, as if tearing off a bandage. We had just started putting money aside to open our own business. Your brother was 8 then, and your mother wanted to stop working to raise him full-time. We had dreams, Sharon. Big ones. But when she found out about you, he trailed off. My mother picked up where he left off, her voice trembling. We had to let those dreams go. We couldn't afford to take the risk anymore, so your father kept his job. I kept working, and we told ourselves it was temporary. But years passed, and nothing changed. She looked up at me, then eyes glassy. Somewhere along the way, we started resenting what we lost. And because of that, we resented you. For a second, I thought I'd misheard. The words hung in the air like smoke. So I said slowly, "You spent my entire childhood punishing me for existing." My mother flinched. It wasn't deliberate, but it was convenient, I snapped. Wasn't it? The hurt, the neglect, the indifference. It all made sense now. Every forgotten birthday, every cold shoulder, every time Jack's mistakes were brushed aside while my achievements were met with silence. It wasn't me. It was them. And their resentment had been the invisible hand guiding every cruel thing they'd done. I sank onto the railing, my knees weak. The garden felt smaller somehow, like the air had been sucked out of it. My father rubbed his temples. "We didn't realize how much damage we caused until we lost you. When you cut us off, we blamed you at first. But after Jack's wife died, after everything fell apart, we saw what kind of parents we had been." "You mean what kind of parents you weren't," I muttered. He didn't argue. That more than anything unsettled me. "We're sorry, Sharon," my mother said. Her voice cracked for the first time I could remember. "We can't undo what we did, but we wanted you to know the truth. You deserve that much." Truth. The word felt like poison and medicine at once. I didn't cry. Not at first. I just sat there staring at the cracked porch step between us, trying to process decades of emotional starvation. When I finally spoke, my voice was barely a whisper. "You think this helps?" That hearing. "I was a mistake makes it easier." "No," she said. "But maybe it explains." "It explains nothing." My composure shattered. "You didn't have to love your circumstances, but you chose not to love me." My father's eyes softened with something that looked like regret. "You're right." That's when the tears came, silent, shaking, relentless. The kind that don't burn, they hollow. I stood up abruptly. "You should go." "Sharon." I said go. They hesitated, then rose quietly. My mother opened her mouth like she wanted to say more, but my father touched her arm. They walked down the path slowly, as if carrying something fragile between them. When they reached the cab, she turned once more. "We really are sorry." I didn't answer. I couldn't. They drove away, the sound of tires fading into the hum of the afternoon. Ronnie wrapped his arms around me from behind. I didn't realize I was shaking until he whispered, "Breathe." I clung to him like a child. The dam broke, then the sobs I'd swallowed for 30 years spilling out at once. "I was never wanted," I choked. "Not even by them." He held me tighter. "Then want yourself, Sharon. You deserve that much." We stayed like that for a long time until the sun dipped below the hedges and the sky turned the color of rust. But even as the day ended, the conversation replayed in my head on a loop. Their words, their faces, that awful fragile apology. I wanted to believe they meant it, that maybe this was closure. But Ronnie's voice echoed in the back of my mind, low and certain. That didn't sound like peace to me. It sounded like preparation. I didn't know what he meant then, but soon I would. That night I didn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard my mother's voice again. "You weren't planned." It echoed in my head until it became a lullaby of rejection. Ronnie stayed awake beside me, holding my hand without saying a word. Around 3 a.m., I finally sat up and whispered, "I have to write them." He didn't try to stop me. He just nodded once the way you do when you know someone has to walk through the fire themselves. So I sat at the kitchen table, the glow of my laptop washing the room in pale light. The cursor blinked like a pulse, and I began to write. Subject for what it's worth. Before I say anything, I want to thank you for coming to me and trying to make things right. I appreciate it, even if it's late. But I need you both to understand something. Knowing I was unplanned doesn't excuse the years you spent making me feel unwanted. It doesn't erase the birthdays you forgot, the illnesses you dismissed, or the way you treated my pain like an inconvenience. I can forgive what I understand, but I can't forget what I felt. You always told me family means sacrifice, but the only person who ever had to sacrifice was me. I gave up my dignity, my peace, my hope for a mother's hug just to earn a sliver of approval. I don't hate you. I'm too tired for that, but I can't be part of a family that only remembers me when it's desperate. I need space. Maybe one day I'll be ready to talk again. But for now, please respect my silence. When I hit send, I expected some kind of relief. It didn't come. Instead, I just stared at the screen, feeling like I'd mailed my heart to a black hole. The next 6 days were quiet, unnervingly quiet. No calls, no messages, no angry relatives. I started to believe that maybe, just maybe, they understood. Maybe the apology had been real. Maybe the silence was peace. Then, on the 7th evening, the doorbell rang. The first ring was normal. The second came faster. By the third, it was a frantic pounding. Ronnie was still in the shower, so I went to the door towel in hand, muttering, "Who rings like—" and froze. My parents stood outside. My mother's lips were pressed into a thin, bloodless line. My father's expression was hard, a mask I hadn't seen since childhood. "Sharon," he said, his tone clipped, "we read your email." "I asked you not to contact me," I said quietly. "That included showing up at my house." "We needed to see you in person," my mother said. Her voice trembled, but not from sadness, from anger. "Why?" I asked. "To prove you don't respect boundaries." My father's jaw tightened. "Because we thought you might be reasonable if we spoke face to face." I almost laughed. "You think this is reasonable?" He ignored that. "You overreacted, Sharon. That's what we came to say. You took our apology and turned it into some kind of personal attack." I blinked at him. "An apology? You told me I was an accident. And you've punished us ever since he snapped. Do you know what it's like to give up everything for your children? Your mother and I worked every day for 30 years. I wanted to start my own company, but I didn't because of you." "Because of me." My voice cracked. "You chose to be a parent. That's not a debt I owe." My mother stepped forward, her perfume sharp enough to sting. "We didn't come here to argue. We came here because you've completely misunderstood what we were trying to say. We're not your enemies, Sharon, but you've made yourself the victim in everything. Always." "Victim," I whispered. "You think I chose to grow up feeling invisible?" Her eyes flashed. "We made sacrifices too, you know. You act like we had it easy. Your father gave up his dream because of you. I gave up mine. You think that didn't hurt us?" Ronnie appeared behind me, still drying his hair with a towel. "That's enough," he said firmly. "You need to leave." My father glared at him. "We're not talking to you." "No," Ronnie said, stepping closer. Voice calm but sharp as glass. "You're talking at her. There's a difference." My mother's voice rose brittle with emotion. "You don't understand." "She does," Ronnie cut in. "Too well. That's the problem." For a second, none of us spoke. Then my father took a deep breath and said in a tone I'll never forget, "If you keep holding on to this nonsense, you'll regret it. One day we won't be around, and you'll wish you'd forgiven us." I stared at him not with anger, but exhaustion. "You don't get to threaten me with your mortality to earn my sympathy." He frowned. "We just want to be a family again." "Then maybe you should have tried being one when I still needed you." My mother's voice broke. "Sharon, please." But Ronnie stepped between us now. She said no. Leave. Something in his tone must have reached them, because for the first time in my life, my father looked unsure. He glanced at my mother, muttered something under his breath, and turned toward the door. Before following, my mother looked at me one last time. "You used to be kind," she said softly. "I don't know what happened to you." I wanted to tell her the truth, that kindness dies when it's starved long enough, but I couldn't find the words. The door closed behind them with a heavy click. For a long time, I just stood there trembling. Ronnie gently pulled me into his arms. I buried my face in his chest and finally let go. I cried the way a dam breaks, messy, unstoppable, loud. Every sob dragged another memory out of me. Every cold word, every moment of being dismissed, every time I was made to feel like a burden. When I could finally speak, my voice came out in a whisper. Why would they even bother pretending to apologize if they didn't mean it? Ronnie rubbed slow circles on my back. Because they don't want to feel guilty. They just want you to move on so they can sleep at night. He was right. They didn't want forgiveness. They wanted absolution. And those aren't the same thing. Later, after I'd stopped crying, Ronnie sat across from me at the kitchen table. The same table where I'd written that email. He said quietly, "They didn't come to make peace. They came to control the narrative again. It's what they've always done." I looked at him. "So what do I do now?" "Nothing," he said simply. "You already did the hardest thing. You told them no." But deep down, I knew it wasn't over. Because people like my parents don't lose control quietly. They regroup. They retaliate. And as I sat there wiping tears from my face, I couldn't shake the feeling that their next move was already in motion. The next morning, the world felt quieter than it should have. No phone buzzing, no emails pinging, no familiar chorus of guilt, just stillness. I made coffee for both of us, but Ronnie didn't touch his cup. He just watched me, thoughtful, careful. "You're too calm," he said finally. I smiled faintly. "You say that like it's a bad thing." "It is," he said. "You only go quiet when something's breaking inside." He wasn't wrong. But I didn't know how to explain what I was feeling. It wasn't sadness anymore. It was something heavier, a hollow clarity. I had spent years begging my parents to see me, to listen, to love me. And now that I'd finally stopped trying, I realized how deep their absence ran, like a missing piece I'd kept chasing, even after I knew it was gone. They never wanted to fix things, I murmured. They just wanted control back. Ronnie nodded slowly. You saw it too. We spent that entire day unpacking the visit, replaying every word, every glance. The more we talked, the clearer it became. Their apology wasn't remorse, it was bait. They thought guilt would work again, I said bitterly. That if they told me I ruined their lives, I'd start apologizing for existing like I used to. Ronnie leaned back in his chair. They needed you to believe their version of events, that they were victims too. But they're not, I whispered. They chose resentment. They chose favoritism. They chose silence when I was begging for help. I walked over to the window, watching a bird land on the railing outside. It pecked at a crumb and flew off free and unbothered. I envied that. I used to think forgiveness was freedom, I said. But maybe it's just another kind of cage one they build to make you stay. Ronnie came up behind me, wrapping his arms around my waist. Then maybe it's time you stop forgiving people who don't want to change. That night, I deleted their numbers for good. I didn't just block them. This time I erased them completely, like names carved into wet cement that I finally smoothed over. But as I pressed delete, something strange happened. A memory surfaced, faint but sharp enough to cut. I was 12, sitting at the dinner table, watching my father pour Jack another glass of milk while I sat with an empty cup. My mother laughed at some story Jack was telling, and I remember saying quietly, "Can I have some too?" Her reply had been immediate. "Stop interrupting your brother." Such a small moment. But that night I went to bed thirsty. And that was the night I learned that love in our house wasn't shared, it was rationed. I sat on the couch, knees pulled up to my chest, letting that memory fade. Ronnie sat across from me, watching in silence until I said, "I think I finally get it." They never wanted a daughter. They wanted a scapegoat. He didn't argue. He just said, "Then stop playing the role they wrote for you." His words settled deep in my bones. I decided to take a walk, needing air. The streets were slick with last night's rain, the kind that makes everything smell like metal and earth. I walked past a playground empty, except for a single swing moving in the wind. I thought about Jack's boys, those two little faces I hadn't seen in years. Did they know what kind of mess they'd been born into? Would they grow up hearing the same comparisons, the same manipulative words? I hoped not. When I got home, Ronnie was on the couch with his laptop. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, sitting beside him. "I think I'm just done being their project." He turned the laptop toward me. "Then you'll want to see this." On the screen was a social media post, my mother's. Some children forget who raised them. Some hearts grow cold when money blinds them. But a parent's love never fades, even when it's betrayed. Hundreds of comments underneath. People offering sympathy. Family friends saying things like, "You deserve better, Margaret, and you were always such a good mother." The post had a picture attached to family photo from years ago. Me, age 15, standing off to the side. Jack in the center, arms around both of them. Ronnie turned to me. "They're painting you as the villain again." I stared at the screen. My heart should have raced, but it didn't. It just slowed. "Let them," I said finally. "I'm done trying to rewrite their story. I'll write my own." He smiled faintly. "That sounds like freedom." "It feels like it," I said. The next few weeks were quiet. No calls. No visits. It was as if they'd vanished, except for the occasional online dig, which I ignored. For once, the silence wasn't heavy. It was sacred. Until one morning, an unfamiliar number called. I almost didn't answer, but something told me to. "Hello, Mrs. Butler," a man's voice asked. "This is Daniel Harris from Parker & Lowe Law Firm. I represent your parents." My stomach tightened. "What is this about?" "I've been instructed to inform you." He said politely that your parents are removing you from their will and leaving their estate to your brother Jack and his children. I let out a short, breathless laugh. They still think I care. The lawyer hesitated. "So, you're not contesting?" "No," I said. "Tell them they can keep their money. I've already paid enough." When I hung up, Ronnie was watching me from the kitchen doorway. That was them. "Through a lawyer this time," I said dryly. "They're cutting me out of their will." He raised an eyebrow. "That's their grand revenge, apparently." And then I smiled, not bitterly, but with a strange, quiet relief. Good. Now they can't pretend to own me anymore. That night, as we sat on the couch, watching the rain streak the windows, Ronnie reached over and intertwined his fingers with mine. "You think this is really over?" "I think it has to be," I said. "They've shown me who they are. I finally believe them." He leaned in, resting his head against mine. "Then let's stop looking back." But just as the quiet began to settle again, my phone buzzed with a message. A single line from an unknown number. "You'll regret this, Sharon. Blood doesn't forget." I stared at it for a long time. "Who is it?" Ronnie asked. I deleted the message without replying. "No one," I said softly. "Just a ghost trying to stay alive." Outside, thunder rolled over the city. The storm wasn't over, but for the first time in my life, I wasn't afraid of it. 6 months passed, long enough for the noise to fade, for the whispers to dull, for my parents' bitterness to become background static I no longer tuned into. Life moved forward in small, quiet ways. Ronnie and I started spending weekends at the lake outside town, the kind of place where everything smells like pine and wet stone. We cooked, read, talked about the future. It felt foreign at first to build something peaceful after years of living in survival mode. But peace has a strange way of feeling dangerous when you've grown up with chaos. You start waiting for the next explosion. It came one afternoon in the form of a cousin I hadn't spoken to in years, Megan, my mother's niece. Her name popped up on my phone with a single message. "Jack's back." My heart stopped for a second. I called her immediately. "Back?" I asked. "Where?" "At your parents' house," she said. "He just showed up, brought the kids. Says he's sober now, working again, moving to LA for a new job. He wanted to say goodbye before leaving." I didn't know how to feel. Relief, anger, envy. Maybe all of them. Megan hesitated. "They said they're leaving everything to him now. The house, the savings. Thought you should know." I laughed softly. "They already told their lawyer that months ago." "Still," she said, lowering her voice, "it's weird. They're acting like they won something." "They didn't," I replied. "They just lost what little dignity they had left." After I hung up, I sat on the porch for a long time, staring at the sky as clouds moved lazily across it. The idea of Jack being back, of him rebuilding his life, should have made me angry. Once upon a time it might have. But now all I could think was at least someone got out alive. That evening, Ronnie found me watching the sunset. "You okay?" "Jack's back," I said. "He's taking the boys to LA." He raised his eyebrows. "Good for him." "Yeah," I exhaled slowly. "Good for him." We sat in silence for a moment. The orange light spilled across the porch, touching everything in gold. Then I said what had been sitting in my chest all day. "They're leaving everything to him." Ronnie shrugged. "Let them. You don't need their inheritance. You've already inherited enough pain." I smiled faintly. "You always know what to say." He leaned closer, voice low. "That's because I mean it. You've built your own life, one that's not poisoned by them. That's worth more than any will." He was right. And for the first time, I didn't just know it, I believed it. That night, I dreamed about my parents. Not the cruel versions I grew up with, but older, smaller ones, sitting alone at their kitchen table, whispering to each other like strangers. My father's hand shook as he poured coffee. My mother's lipstick was smudged. They looked lost. When I woke, I didn't feel pity. I felt distance, clean, solid distance. A week later, a letter arrived. A real one, handwritten in my mother's perfect cursive. No return address, just my name. Ronnie frowned when he saw it. "You sure you want to open that?" "I do." Inside was a single page. "Sharon, we've accepted that you've chosen your path. We just wanted you to know that your brother is back and making things right. We're proud of him. We hope someday you'll understand what we did for you was never meant to hurt you. We did our best. Love, Mom and Dad." No apology, no acknowledgement, just a final attempt to rewrite history. I folded the letter once, then again, and dropped it into the trash. Their best, I said softly, was never good enough. That night, Ronnie and I sat in the living room, surrounded by the quiet hum of the city. He turned to me, suddenly, eyes warm. "I know this year has been heavy," he said, "but I think it's time for something new." I frowned. "New?" He smiled, his hand resting gently on my stomach. It took me a second to understand. Then my breath caught. "Wait, you mean—" He nodded. "Yeah, you're going to be a mom." The world tilted. For a moment, everything went silent. No bitterness, no echoes of my parents, no ghosts. Just joy. I pressed a trembling hand against my stomach. "I don't know if I'll be any good at it." "You will," he said firmly, "because you know exactly what not to be." I laughed through tears. "God, that's a low bar." "Maybe," he said, "but it's also a promise." That night I lay awake, one hand resting on the small, invisible life growing inside me. The thought terrified me and thrilled me all the same. I thought about my parents again, but this time not with anger, with finality. They would never know this child. They'd made that choice themselves. And maybe that was the purest kind of freedom, to end the inheritance of pain right here, to give my child a different story. As the first light of dawn crept through the blinds, I whispered to the quiet, "You'll never have to earn love the way I did." Then I smiled. For the first time, it wasn't bitter. Outside, the world was waking up clean, soft, and new. 6 more months slipped by, and the world looked different. My belly had rounded the baby's heartbeat, filled our home every few weeks, and Ronnie had learned how to assemble a crib without reading the manual. Peace didn't come all at once. It arrived in fragments. In the mornings when I felt the baby kick and realized this life depends on me, not in fear, but in trust. In the evenings when Ronnie and I sat on the porch, hands tangled, talking about baby names instead of family drama. The past still visited sometimes, though, mostly at night when the house was quiet. I'd scroll past social media posts from distant relatives and see my parents' names tagged in pictures of Jack and his boys. They all looked normal, smiling, whole, as if the family fracture had been neatly stitched over. And every time I saw it, I felt that familiar ache, the ache of being erased. One night, Ronnie found me staring at one of those photos. My mother was holding Jack's youngest son in her lap, captioned, "Grandparents never stop loving, even when children forget." Ronnie leaned over my shoulder, reading. "They're still posting things like that. Every few weeks," I said softly. "It's like they're writing letters to ghosts." He brushed my hair back gently, then let them haunt themselves. I smiled faintly. "You think they ever regret it?" He thought for a moment. "Regret requires self-awareness. They only feel loss, and they'll blame you for causing it." That stung, but he wasn't wrong. Still, as I sat there staring at their smiling faces, I realized something unexpected. I didn't feel hate anymore. Just distance, cold, clean distance. They could rewrite the story however they wanted. I wasn't a character in it anymore. A week later, I got another message from Megan, short, hesitant. "Your mom posted about your baby. Said something like, 'Some of us will never get to be grandparents even when we deserve it. Thought you should know.'" I read it twice, then set the phone down. Ronnie asked, "You okay?" "Yeah," I said quietly. "I expected it." "What do you want to do?" "Nothing." He tilted his head. "Nothing. I'm done playing defense," I said. "They can say whatever they want. I'm not chasing a lie anymore." And for the first time, I meant it. That weekend, we held a small gathering. Just a few friends, warm lights strung across the backyard, and laughter that felt effortless. Someone asked about the baby's name, and I smiled. "Her name will be Hope," I said. Ronnie squeezed my hand, because that's what she is. Everyone cheered softly, and for a moment, I saw the future unfold like a movie scene. The crib by the window, morning light spilling across tiny hands' lullabies instead of arguments. After everyone left, I stood in the doorway listening to the quiet hum of the night. The air smelled like jasmine and rain. I thought about how strange life is, how you can lose everything you thought you needed and still end up with exactly what you were missing. My parents had taught me everything about love, just not in the way they intended. They taught me what happens when it's conditional, when it's currency, when it's withheld until obedience. And now, with every beat of the tiny heart inside me, I knew my child would learn something else entirely. That night, I opened my journal and wrote a letter not to my parents, but to my daughter. "Dear Hope, if you ever wonder why you don't know your grandparents, I'll tell you the truth. They loved me in the only way they knew, with fear, control, and regret. But I chose to stop that story from reaching you. You will never have to earn love. It will live here in this house, waiting for you before you even ask for it. You'll know that mistakes don't make you unworthy, and silence isn't love's punishment. You are not an accident. You are the proof that love can start over." When I finished, I closed the journal and placed it on the baby's dresser. The nursery was still half done, paint cans in the corner, tiny clothes folded neatly on the chair. I stood there for a long time, feeling her move beneath my ribs, soft and certain. Ronnie came in quietly, resting a hand on my shoulder. "Writing again?" "Yeah," I said, smiling. "Just something I want her to read someday." He nodded, glancing around the unfinished room. "Looks like home already." "It does," I said. "For the first time, it really does." Outside, the rain started again, gentle this time, not like the storms before. And as I stood there listening, I realized that peace wasn't the absence of pain. It was learning to breathe around it. I had finally stopped trying to fix the past. Now I was building something new, something worth protecting. Maybe one day my parents would realize what they'd lost. Maybe not. But their story wasn't mine anymore. This time I got to choose. I placed a hand over my belly and whispered, "We'll write a better story, you and me." And for the first time in my life, the ending felt exactly right.